everyone, and welcome to the Ion Canon podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on lore, the High Republic, and the whole. Oh,
Well, you good?
I was hearing myself on the another
Oh
video.
no. Oh no.
I know, and the whole
Try this again.
far, far away. My name is Joel, and I'm coming to you from Star Wars Underworld, Orange County. And as always, Matthew is joining me from across the continent and north of the border. How you doing this week?
I'm doing pretty well. Got a long weekend, taking it easy, and ready to talk about this here country.
Yes, connections to Canada. Blame Canada. Blame
No,
Canada.
not blame Canada.
I had to do that song at least once. Okay, Canada in Star Wars might be a bit obscure, but if you know where they're there, if you know where to look. Thankfully, half the members of the podcast hail from the Great White North, and so we can spot plenty of references from Naboo's shimmering lakes and benevolent constitutional monarchy to real-world creatives like Hayden Christensen, Deborah, Chow, and Pablo Hidalgo, lore master himself. Canada surely punches above its weight. On the eve of Canada Day, we take a look at ways this land has inspired the galaxy far, far away. And don't worry, America, you're up next week.
There we go.
All right. Of course, we got to get the plugs out of the way. Matthew, what's going on Tractor Beam?
Yeah, this week, Tractor Beam is coming Wednesday. I'll pop that down there. That's a typo. That's okay. So every Wednesday at 8 p.m. No, what time is it at? 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time, right here on the Underworld YouTube channel. Chris Abbott and I talk about the comic books that came out this week. Of course, we're talking about one magazine article that came out a few weeks ago, or not a magazine article, a magazine short story that came out a few weeks ago, the last short story in the High Republic series, Insider Short from 232. Also, Jedi Knights number 5 and Poe Dameron Codebreaker number 2. I know High Republic Adventures number 19 came out, but I'm not done Trials of the Jedi. So,
how far are you are in Trials of the
Jedi? I'm
about
halfway through. Oh,
nice. Nice. Good.
So I'm waiting on that until to catch up on that, and then I'm going to read High Republic Adventures, and then I'll make sure everything's squared away and spoiler free for myself is how it works. So here on the Underworld YouTube channel at Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.
I saw like the preview for the latest High Republic comics, and I'm like, oh my god, there's a big spoiler. And I like texted you like, do not look, delete splash page we love you, splash page. Delete splash page from your Blue Sky. Run,
unfollow. yeah, I'm just kidding.
Run.
I won't unfollow you guys. Don't worry.
No, don't worry. This as well, you can always check us on the Ion Canon Blue Sky, by the way, and the Star Wars Underworld Discord. We're taking the week off, actually, I think, this week, because it's 4th of July, and probably
the Discord,
people are going to be... What? Yeah, on the Discord. On the Discord, because it's 4th of July, and on this Friday, and people are probably going to be barbecuing, fireworking, who knows, political activisms, or something else.
Who knows? It'll be interesting.
So, we're taking the week off. Also because me and another friend might be doing something else that 4th of July anyway. So, So, and also Ben's not going to be there either. He's also barbecuing. His restaurant probably gets busy on the 4th of July.
Probably true.
So we're taking a week off. We'll probably be back the week after. And I don't know. We might watch a movie. I'm thinking of watching the original 70. I think it's 78 Superman with Christopher Reeve and John Williams' brilliant score afterwards. Nice. So that'd be fun. Those are all the plugs, I think. Oh, and don't forget to super chat us if you can. We will interrupt ourselves to read your super chat. So do that, friends. And all right, I think I got everything. I'm
just a little bit more. So we're on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. So as Joel mentioned, Underworld Network. As Joel mentioned, we got super chats, we got YouTube memberships. Please do comment as well as if you wish. But if you super chat us, we will get to it as soon as we can. Also to mention, what I got to mention? Audio. If you prefer to listen to audio, thank you for watching. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch, but if you prefer audio, we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So look up Ion Canon podcast, not just Ion Canon, but Ion Canon podcast. And Tractor Beam is also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. All right.
Now we can do to the week of Star Wars. I'm not always used to doing the intro, folks, so I'm always a little rusty.
That's
Compared to
okay.
Matthew, who is the master of intros.
There
But
you go.
once again, I will turn it to Matthew because we'll let him start this week. So, Matthew, what are you doing for your week of Star Wars?
So as I plugged last week, we got this past Thursday was Resistance Fest, and our buddy Din of F105 organized this whole rock show. Local Canadian artists, Southern Ontario artists, a few from Toronto, a few from Kingston, Ontario, if you know that place. So that was fun. That was at the what was it called? The Horseshoe Tavern, historic Horseshoe Tavern. And if you go to Din's Instagram, F105 Music, lots of, I think, yeah, there's probably some reels. All the different artists have some reels and stories and whatnot up there. His display. So the clone trooper, Coruscant Guard clone trooper was in there. Got a few lightsabers in there. The idea was kind of resisting the Empire, saying we're not going to be the 51st state, all that stuff, but also a celebration of Canadian talent and Canadian up and coming bands that Din knows, and headlined by legendary Irish Canadian band The Moans. So that was a fun night, really fun night, and yeah, definitely worth keeping up. Give Din a follow on at F105 Music on all your platforms. Check him out on Spotify as well, and Apple, etc. And yeah, looking forward to what he's got in store next.
Very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for my week in Star Wars, thank you. Yeah, well, Tyler mentioned it. It's my birthday. So, yeah, it's my birthday.
Life Day.
Life Day. And
I got go for it. Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Got some Star Wars stuff, which I have here on my table. Sorry, the camera. You can see my big head. So first, I got this cool card from my dad. It's a pop-up card. Look, it's Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi with a pinata.
Well, those are fun. The pinata, that's great.
I've got that. I also got the Marvel collection for Dark Horse Comics, the Epic Collection, the Old Republic.
Nice.
That's about tells the stories before the Old Republic video game, dealing with the Mandalorian Wars. I also got
That's okay.
Marvel Epic Collection Star Wars The Clone Wars, written by John Ostrander. We have here, this is the arc that cover the Legends Battle of Camino. We got the Quinlan Voss stuff. We got one with Dirge. Oh, look, here's Ventress. There's Ventress. So we got that. And the last of my Star Wars birthday-centric stuff, I have the Ahsoka Season 1 DVD with bonus features.
Is they still back, or
I think
just the normal?
I think this isn't just normal.
Okay, still, that's cool.
Yep, but I got this. Yeah, and that's my Star Wars haul for this birthday.
Yeah, well, a happy birthday to you, and
thank you.
May you enjoy this coming year, full of Star Wars, full of fun, full of all those things. There we go. Alrighty, let's move it right along to our main topic. And I should have done the maple leaf emoji. Why didn't I do the maple leaf emoji? That's okay. Yeah. So tomorrow is Canada Day, as Joel mentioned, and so figure why not just talk about all the different Star Wars or Canadian references in Star Wars that have kind of piled up over the last little bit. And yeah, just going into those things, things that may be intentional, some things aren't so intentional necessarily, but if it is by a Canadian creative, then it just might be. We'll see. And to kind of quickly mention though, just out of universe in our real world, there's a whole bunch. There's a whole bunch of Canadians that come to mind who have really made their mark on the galaxy far, far away. Between actors and authors and writers and directors and whatnot. So, I mean, we got Hayden Christensen is the big one, right? Deborah Chow. So both Hayden and Deborah are from Toronto, and that's why I'm wearing the Kenobi thing. Just loved that really great moment. The theater viewing. Yeah, so yeah, Deborah definitely making her mark. Pablo Hidalgo, as I mentioned, Winnipeg Zone, Be sure to spam his blue sky with wishes of happy Canada Day tomorrow. That's always fun. E.K. Johnston, who will come back later on in this episode, we will talk about her work. Brought a bunch of references to in the Padme novel and whatnot. Shariel is a comic book cover artist. She's drawn for High Republic Adventures quite a bit. Mike Del Mundo is another comic book artist, and he did some pretty iconic Vader covers. The one with, I have it, but kind of got damaged. The Vader #1 2015 with it's the grill, the mask with the grill, and little Annie in the grill. That one, that's him. Also, let's say I think the Vader staring down clones in the 2017 run, #2, that variant. That's pretty iconic for me. Bridging the saga. He likes to bridge the saga. He also did a cover for Vader Black, White, and Red. So definitely a talent there. Megan Wong, who we interviewed on this podcast. She's done a few covers for High Republic Adventures as well. Mr. Drew Karpyshyn, I mentioned him a lot. He's from Edmonton. Of course, wrote his main contribution is writing. I think it's fair to say main contribution writing the Bane trilogy and the story for KOTOR, the Revan story. I believe that's correct. That's right, Drew. Yeah. So
I think he also just wrote. I also think he wrote the actual games too.
No, that's what I mean. The game KOTOR, the story, is kind of his major contribution. So that's pretty impressive, right? That's pretty impactful in the Legend storyline. And Ethan Sachs gets an honorable mention. His daughter goes to university, goes to a Canadian university, so he visits. He's going to Montreal Comic Con. He's coming to Fan Expo Canada. So keep an eye out for when we get to chat with him. Looking forward to saying hi to Ethan. Here coming up at Fan Expo. Also in 2027, Ryan Gosling, London, Ontario's Ryan Gosling, and Starfighter. If it ever happens, we'll see the Ray film. Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, Pakistani Canadian director. So yeah, we'll see if that film takes off at all. And I'm sure there's others I've missed. I don't know, Joel, if you remember any, but that's a pretty impressive list as it is.
Is Star Wars ever filmed in Canada? My dad was asking me when I told him what our subject was this week.
That's a good question.
I don't think it has.
I know Star Trek does now for sure. Like all the series are mainly filmed here, but yeah, I don't think so. Would be surprised. Yeah, I don't think Hoth was filmed in Canada, but we'll get to Hoth later.
Didn't they film in like the literal Arctic or somewhere? No, they filmed somewhere like actual cold.
I think they filmed in maybe Norway.
Okay.
Or something. But I mean, the Arctic, Canada's in the Arctic, or the Arctic's in Canada. So, yeah, it's a pretty impressive. Mostly Toronto, but got a bit of Winnipeg, got a bit of Edmonton in there. Yeah, any of those names stand out to you?
I mean, I always forget Hayden Christensen, and I remember Deborah Chow. I actually kind of forgot. I forgot Pablo was from Canada originally.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely reminded me of like, oh yeah, here are those people I know who are from Canada who have contributed. I'm trying to think of like anybody else.
Yeah,
like
nobody missed.
I'm sure maybe there's like some probably people in production and stuff who are not as well known, but
that's
those are definitely the big names I can think of that you got right.
Yeah. Yeah. What is it? Pablo for Winnipeg. Yeah, as I mentioned. Yeah. So without Canada, there would be no Star Wars as we know it. I'm just kidding. That might not be true, but there you go. Okay, so kind of moving right along here into the universe, and we have a got a miscellaneous category. Then we got a few planets, and we want to spend a lot of time on Naboo. So we'll spend a bit on Naboo. So here's a miscellaneous, just a few little odds and ends we picked up. So the Galactic Senate it's interesting because the Chancellor isn't. So we're getting our poli sci hats on here. The Chancellor isn't elected popular election. Probably before Palpatine, he was probably a bit more of a figurehead, and we see with Monmouth, we see how senators are able to govern to some extent. And so, yeah, you can say that the Senate is quite parliamentary, and then there's also a sense of federal relationships. So that's the thing. That Canada was basically the system of government was, let's have the British style parliament with American style federalism, and so we can make sure that uh, all the different provinces are represented in the government, in the actual governing party. And yeah, maybe we see with Mon Mothma different voting blocks. Padme, Bail, Mon Mothma, 3 different planets, although there are some parallels to an Alderaan and Naboo. I picked that up while making these notes. But yeah, they have to work together. And, I mean, I should also say the Separatist Parliament. I mean, that's looks like the Westminster House of Commons, right?
To be fair, most parliaments are Westminster style. Like,
Yes.
no one actually does our legislature. Like, America's like so unique and
Yeah,
arcane
that's true.
that no one else actually adopts our way of doing things. Not
Yeah.
even the other countries that have 2 legislatures do our way of thinking.
Yeah, and I mean, we have a bicameral legislature too, but I mean, France, I guess, is the closest, was modeled off of the U.S. Congress a little bit. I mean, not really. I mean, they have a parliament, and so their cabinet and government, it's complicated. Maybe the Galactic Senate is a bit more like the French system, but so yeah, so there's parliament. You can look at it. I mean, none of this is done. There isn't enough of a deep dive. We need a bit more. I mean, I don't think. I mean, I want Alexander Freed to write a prequel to Mask of Fear, set like before the Phantom Menace, just to really give us the lore dump of how the Senate actually functions. That'd be something. Maybe we'll be inspired by Canadian federal parliamentary politics. There we go. I think Germany's kind of like it too. One little note: Crokin. If you read E.K. Johnston's Ahsoka novel, so E.K. Johnston, of course, is from southwestern Ontario, town called Stratford, which is named, of course, after the Stratford Inn in the UK, and is where the Shakespeare Festival is. There's a game called Crokin that's referenced in there, talked about on this planet that is featured in the novel, involving this board with these pegs, and you got to flick these discs into the middle. That's actually a very Ontario-based game called Crokinole, and I definitely remember playing that growing up, especially going to a pioneer village. So E.K. Johnston really slipping that into the references, into the that reference into the novel. That was a fun little nod that she did. Also, lastly, Hoth is a kind of little funny sort of Arctic. What's interesting with Hoth is the rebels choose to go there, and because they can hide there, the Arctic sovereignty is actually a pretty serious issue, even now more so because Russia's right there, kind of just over the globe. And so there have been moves by the Russian Navy coming in there. Of course, Alaska's there too. The fact that it's so remote, it makes it a bit like the Wild West. And so if you're able to keep warm enough, it might be a good place for some folks to hide. I might be some folks hiding there now. I don't know, but with the Arctic, all the islands in Nunavut and Northwest Territories. So yeah, that's one of the weirder foreign policy issues that we have to deal with. But Hoth kind of represents that from another point of view. So those are the miscellaneous ones. Joel, I think you wanted to maybe talk a bit more about the Galactic Senate, but anything else you might have in mind?
I mean, I only brought up the Senate because it's like, but I think that's more just coincidence in the fact that I
Yeah,
think the Senate's always been this. I mean, hey, I think the Senate's based more off Rome. But then
sure.
again, I think the American legislative government is so arcane and bizarre that it's like almost every other system has a more streamlined legislature than we do. Ours is the most bizarre. There's a reason why no
Mm.
one adopts our way of government. We don't even adopt our own way of government when we impose it on somebody else. Like we invaded Iraq in 2003. We didn't make it a federal president, quasi-president. We made it just a parliamentary system.
Right.
Um, After we toppled Saddam Hussein. Um,
Hmm.
Although with Afghanistan, we gave it like a super presidential system where the presidency is almost like all powerful. So we gave it like more of a France
Sure.
all powerful presidency monarchy thing. So even we don't adopt our own government style when we invade countries,
Yeah.
and so my point is, I just think the Senate's. I personally just think the Senate is just typical British style without political parties. The Senate
Yeah.
votes in the chancellor. The chancellor is essentially a prime minister. They administer the country or the federal government
Mm-hmm.
with, and they get to have a cabinet. Although we don't really see the cabinet, but I do know in some High Republic books there are cabinet ministers, and so it has like a secretary of transportation.
Yeah.
Uh, so I just kind of assume that's just how it works. And then when Palpatine declares his emergency powers, he just sort of like any sort of legislation that the Senate used to do just can now be issued by decree.
Mm.
Um, so
Yeah.
that's just how I've always assumed it. So yeah, I don't have much to say about that. The legislature side,
Mm.
just
Yeah.
I think most countries in the world, the Westminster system is the most effective. It's just we don't do it here.
Hmm. just doesn't try. Would you try playing Crokin if you could?
Maybe it sounds like a weird version of Battleship.
No, it's very different. It's more like horizontal darts.
Oh, I can't really do darts because my arms.
Yeah, I know you flick the. Yeah, I'll send you the Wikipedia article. Look it up.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So I think one of the things I've brought up is the written constitution versus a hybrid or unwritten constitution, and I wonder if one of the ways we can speak of this transition from the republic to the empire is the transition from a hybrid constitution to a strictly written down constitution. So what I mean by hybrid constitution is, so that's another thing with the UK, they don't actually have a document called the Constitution of the United Kingdom. They just, what their constitution is are these norms and the constitutional
We have that too in America. We
legislations.
have a lot of things based off of norms and actually written down.
Well, sort of, and I'll get to this distinction in a minute, but uh, I'll get to why the US is still different anyways. A lot of norms, and there's case law, and doing the circle thing. But there's no document called the Constitution of the United Kingdom. It's just a lot of things that just developed over this traditions. Again, a few pieces of legislation, but traditions that have developed over time. And I wonder if the Republic Senate was a bit like that. One of the things that's very clearly in both the UK and Canada, in our constitution, is parties. There's the rule that says the prime minister is the person, the MP, who has the confidence of the House. Effectively, what that means is the MP is the leader of the party that has the most seats, or the coalition that has the most seats. That's how a parliamentary system works. So, I mean, I do think even in Mask of Fear, there is the pro Palpatine faction, then there's the loyal opposition, if you will, and in that sense, there's still a little bit of a he can control the votes and he can reliably pass legislation, and the big thing is that government ministers. We'll get to this later too. The secretary of whatever. I guess that's not so much the case in the Galactic Senate, but the idea with the parliamentary system, our minister of education, our minister of global affairs, those are MPs. They are sitting MPs. The executive is the leader of the legislative, and that is how that's how a parliamentary system works. It's how it is. Parties, therefore, are really more embedded into the way the system works. In the US, I mean, Washington tried to say, no, we're not going to have parties. Good luck, buddy. But obviously that didn't work out. but everything is written down. Just how uh, what Congress is allowed to do, what the House of Representatives is supposed to do, what the Senate is supposed to do, what it's consisted of, what the president is supposed to do, all that. And then, of course, the Supreme Court interprets it, but it is fully written down. And so there,
So
that
nobody
is,
follows it anymore.
well, the problem there is, this is what we'll probably get into next week, is that the Supreme Court is so politicized as well in the U.S.
I mean,
And
Congress
so,
has given up a lot of its own power to the presidency. Like, here, tariffs, you can
yeah,
do this, president.
yeah, that's true too.
War,
Declaring
you don't
war.
need if you go ahead, yeah, emergency
Yeah.
act. There you go.
So, and we'll get into that next week. But,
Right.
yeah.
I will
So,
say,
yeah.
I will say the party thing always interests me because, like, I remember in the Plagueis novel how it
Hmm.
worked with, like, there aren't any political parties, but it's like,
Hmm.
okay, this influential senator who kind of is like the de facto leader of, like, the mid rim worlds
Yeah.
votes this way. So that means the outer rim worlds of this sector are going to go this way because he voted this way, and he
Hmm.
says, and then where he goes, those clans tend to go, and then it's sort
Yeah.
of like, then Palpatine got the number of votes from the Senate to become the head of the chancellor.
I mean, I think,
It's like,
that's sort of what we see in Mask of Fear. Again, we can get to this next week. I think that is kind of how Congress works anyway. But, yeah, well, that is largely how Congress works. Because with Mask of Fear, you see there are thousands of senators. You only have so much time. You have to say, well, I have this many votes following this person. So is that. Yeah, I do want to see more Valordum. What we do get is in closer to the sequel trilogy with Bloodline by Claudia Gray. There are very clear parties, right? And Leia running
I call
for
more factions than parties.
yeah, that's true. But I mean, and part of that's because part of because the drama needs it. But yeah, that was really, there isn't a president, there isn't a chancellor at that point anymore. It doesn't seem like.
No, there
Probably
is. There's still a chancellor.
there's the first
No, no,
senator.
that never got created. There's still that never happened. There's still a chancellor.
I guess I'll have to look back, but I just know that really at stake between the populists and the centrists was for control over the republic, effectively. And
You actually see the chancellor in the Force Awakens. He gets
yeah,
blown
well,
up.
yeah, Villachem, yeah, that's true. But yeah, so I think there, but I think that my point is there. It seems to be that parties in the Senate are more important in terms of the executive function. That's what I'm getting at. Is that again how a parliamentary system works? Is when parties, well, again, the government party, the party with the most seats in the legislature, gets to control the executive branch, and that's not how, of course, how a presidential republic works. So yeah, I wonder if there's more of that, at least a little bit leaning towards that in what Claudia Gray doing for the sake of the drama of the story between Leia and Ransom, and um, finding out this whole Clarice Indian first order emerging first order thing. So it's interesting, but to add to that, the thing that's distinctly Canadian about that is the federalism angle, the combination between a parliamentary system and a federalism and a federal system in which the different planets have representation. They have their own responsibilities for their own planets as part of a federation, not a united federation of planets, but a galactic republic, a new republic. But yeah,
Actually,
it's
I like to
interesting.
ask you this
Yeah.
question because I've always wondered
Mhm.
what is how much what is the obviously we're American, Canada,
Mhm.
both federal side states, but like
Yeah.
um how much I guess autonomy slash what are the bounds between your provinces in the central?
Yeah.
Because like, is it more than even here? Is it less? I know you guys have a central election system, and where our states,
Yeah.
every state gets to run their election
Yeah.
themselves, which is just a chaos. But what is like the?
Mhm.
How much power do your provinces has compared to our states, or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, Elections Canada is very nice and helpful. Yeah, a lot more. We've kind of gone in opposite directions. Well, we have gone in opposite directions, right? The U.S. Constitution started off being very this loose confederation, the Continental Congress, right? The United States, plural. Whereas we started with a very centralized, again, British, taking the
Parliament
assumption,
supreme, and
yeah, parliamentary supremacy.
all hail the king.
Except then there were things that were delineated to the provinces, like healthcare, like education, like transportation, within the provinces, and municipalities are so. Yeah, over time, case law, especially because of Quebec, which kind of just paralleled the Outer Rim. I mean, we can talk about this. The separatist crisis. We've never gone to a full blown civil war, but there is the grumblings. I mean, there's every country has center periphery challenges, but you know Quebec, like the Outer Rim, had a very clear sense of, do we belong or not? And Alberta, to some extent, does as well. Kind of in the other direction. Quebec tends to be more left wing politically. Alberta is the Texas of Canada. But yeah, so a lot of the case law then, in order to give, especially language rights, that allow Quebec to prioritize French to the extent that it needs to and wants to. The Supreme Court said, you have to protect those rights, especially minority rights, because French was considered a minority. Now, what's interesting is, okay, now protecting Anglophones in Quebec is also a minority rights question, because a lot of Anglophones are immigrants, and there's a bit of a sense of French style, Western European style xenophobia sometimes, regarding immigration, because they're so protective of their French heritage. So yeah, that does. I mean, one of the things that. So yeah, I mean, healthcare is administered by the provinces. Education is administered. The way universal healthcare got pushed through and is basically required to be the norm. I mean, the norm of it developed over time, but basically it's provincially administered, but it's federally funded by and large. And I mean, it's funded by both. But what? So this is a bit of a check on provincial autonomy, is to say, say the federal government wants a policy to be, or kind of a policy approach to be enacted across the country. They will say, here's the cash for it, here's the money for it, for you provinces to do that. And if you don't do that, we're going to take some of the cash away. Another thing, there was a there's a fund sharing arrangement between what's called have provinces and have not provinces, the wealthier and the poorer provinces. There are, I mean, technically there is free trade among the provinces, but recently, with the tariffs, there are other logistical barriers and different things that have to be dealt with. I don't think you can make a tariff going from one province to the other. You certainly aren't going to blockade like the Trade Federation. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. But
Alberta province blockades the capital. We could stop.
I mean, that kind of did happen a little bit during COVID. Yeah, that's all complicated.
I mean, that's interesting that we sort of gone reverse, where you're right. I mean, America was very much early on like a confederation, like United States plural. And if you actually look at certain one of the big things, I don't want to turn too much into America thing, but I think you have to compare these two countries.
Yeah,
you are our Anglican cousins. We all belong to the once great empire of
British cousins.
Yeah, no. Sorry. But like there is an interesting thing about if you actually really study the Civil War,
Mhm.
like the Civil War really kind of brought about, I would argue, the modern American nation, where it's like we're not just
Mhm.
loose
Yeah.
collection of states. Like, no, we are the United States. There is a stronger federal government,
Mhm.
and that's kind of when we kind of really unify into a single whole after we
Yeah.
kick the South's butt. It's like, nope, we're going to be one nation, and then there's another, and then the FDR period. You could argue that's really when the federal government really starts to like build
Mhm.
a big nation state into like what you would see in Europe.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, we could do a whole thing. We should do a whole section next week on the Clone War and the Civil War because I mean, those parallels I think are quite intentional. So, yeah,
God's Confederacy for a reason, but yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I'll say one more thing, and then we can move on.
yeah.
I do think, though, um, I do think that the Canadian view of what a political party is
Hmm.
in practice is still far different to what we have here in America.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the Democrats or the Republicans are anything like what your political parties are like and how they function.
No.
They're still too loose and
Yeah.
chaotic and arcane, and it's weird.
Hmm. Well, I mean, there's a reason for that. I mean, that again, because parties are more baked into our constitution, but who controls the executive, as opposed to in the U.S., where yeah, you don't have political parties. Again, we can. There's lots we can talk about next week. Keeping the train rolling along here, keeping the CN rail coming along. First, I'll get some comments here. Can balkanization when? Sure. How's it going from another Commonwealth and Aotearoa Commonwealth family? There we go. Parliamentary, but not so federal. There we go. Nova Scotia could destroy the country's economy. I don't quite see how, but okay. Yeah. Sorry, where are we going here? Yeah.
We're
Okay.
talking about
Yeah.
we're talking about Alderaan. Because
Yes. Yeah, I know that. I'm just looking at these comments here. Yeah, Australia. Yeah, I mean the interesting thing with Australia is they have an elected Senate. So it's also a different.
shit.
There we go. Yes.
Ah,
Okay,
they
yeah,
have the
let's talk
Senate.
about
Wait.
Alderaan. Beautiful planet. Love that planet. Would I mean Naboo is the more enticing planet. But Alderaan is an interesting one for a few reasons. I think one of the big ones is that's a more progressive and outdoorsy alternative to Coruscant. It's still in the core worlds. It's still right there. It's still highly developed. Uh, part of a world, a galactic leader, but definitely a more progressive alternative than Coruscant, than the businessy Coruscant. Um, you know what is pretty clear here. One of the things that I've spotted here are ways in which the Canadian relationship to the U.S. and that comes through in some ways more intentionally than others. We'll get to where it is more intentional, but I think Alderaan a little bit too. I mean, no, they're making alliances under the Emperor's nose. It's kind of just thinking there. Mark Carney going to the EU. Um, Leia or Brea funding the rebellion. I don't know, but not
I don't
that the
think Mark
Canadian government
Carney's
is
funding any
funding.
rebellions.
No, not that the Canadian government is funding any sort of sedition in the U.S. But we're saying, hey, we can't go to the New York Washington route. Even though we have our equivalents of New York. I'm living in it. You see photos. I take photos of downtown Toronto. It has its Manhattan section, but we're able to also look to other countries and other more progressive parts of the world. So there's that. Also, unlike there are parks in New York, but in lots of the U.S., but you see Alderaan. I mean, that's like the Pacific. That's like the Rocky Mountains, like Vancouver. This is what Alderaan is, or at least the Alderaan capital, nestled around the mountains. Yeah, I know there's also Portland, and Seattle, and Sacramento, or whatever. But
Good friend Ellie's from Portland.
there we go. but yeah, so good. Yeah, like an interesting reference there. Also, there's our first mention here of a benevolent monarchy. There are symbols of office. Um, there's a benevolent monarch who the Organa family, who the House Organa House, who uh, people like them. People like them. We don't know what kind of accountability they have legislatively. Um,
Yeah.
we don't know. Like it's this weird thing. I mean, we've mentioned this before. It's this weird thing that it's a hereditary monarchy, but one that is committed to being the well-being of the people. So that's a little bit of a reference, I think, just because
Hereditary monarchy, matriarchy. I don't know if Alderaan's only had queens. I
maybe
think forget. Did it? Have there been kings? Is it just
I
from
don't.
the
I have no
Organa
idea.
bloodline, or is it just queens? I
I
always
don't know.
forget now.
Maybe one thing to find out. Because all we have is Brea and then Leia.
And
So there we go.
Vale took her name, so.
Yeah, there we go.
Mhm.
And just the way Philip joining in Elizabeth family, basically. There are there's symbols of office, and there's a beloved monarchy. Our monarchy doesn't have any power, but there is, at least over the last 50 or so years, a really marked commitment to human development and well-being, and and that's the weird thing, right? It's because they don't have power. They're able to do that. And I think for my day job, thinking about why the papacy is allowed to do that, is free to do that as well, because they're not encumbered by political interests. So it's interesting to see how I mean how that uh, when they are encumbered by political interests, they're still able to be benevolent. I mean, it's an idealized the Alderanian monarchy and Alderaan itself is idealized quite a bit. It's probably why it's almost this before image of why without them, when they're destroyed, the Empire the galaxy can be plunged further into darkness. You know, America, you need Canada without us. I don't know what parallel I'm going through there. Well, here's an example that you brought up in the notes here, Joel. I think this is in Leia, Princess of Alderaan, how all the refugees would flood flood to Alderaan. Especially during possibly during the Clone Wars, but also during the Empire. A lot of Americans dodged the draft and came here. A lot of refugees, now that the U.S. tightens its borders, are going to come here instead. Even I know U of T. I just saw the University of Toronto is welcoming Harvard students. Just to what do you do, right? So yeah, Alderaan. I mean, it's in the core. Mountainy, outdoorsy, benevolent monarchy, and yeah, making some alliances. I don't know what about Alderaan strikes you. Maybe you want to say more about the refugee system,
Oh,
the
I was
refugee
just
bit.
thinking about the refugee thing because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, you know, I always felt Alderaan, I guess, was just, I feel like Alderaan took a lot of political asylum people. And I
Mm-hmm.
know there were definitely a lot of Vietnam draft dodgers who didn't want to fight in Vietnam, and
Yeah.
totally get why.
Mm-hmm.
Who would? Like, I don't want to fight in the war. Political asylum in Canada, please. Thank
Mm-hmm.
you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, it's like got a lot of political asylum seekers, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of intellectual asylum seekers
Yeah.
too. Didn't want to deal with the U.S. government. Not that I blame them.
Mm-hmm.
Came to Canada. Uh, Probably.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is probably because, let's face it, they probably wanted to go to a place where they didn't have to learn another language, so they didn't go to Mexico.
True.
Um, Not that Mexico is lovely.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably have to go to Mexico because that's where I am. I'm down here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't
Mm-hmm.
mind.
Yeah.
But that's probably where you go. Just suffer a little cold. Also
Mm-hmm.
think of the snowy mountains. Um,
Yeah.
you know, um, but yeah, that's definitely what I was thinking. Like, I always got the sense that Alderaan was very much a home for like political asylum seekers just looking to get away from whatever political asylum stuff they were looking for.
That would be a fantastic story. I would love to see it. I mean, it would be tragic if they said it kind of near A New Hope. Because
I did it. I escaped the Empire's oppression. I'm Alderaan. I'm safe. Hey, what's that in the sky? Oh,
we don't have a moon. We've never had a moon before. Too soon. It's been 1977. Anyway, yeah. So it is interesting. Those kind of thinking about those parallels. I don't think any of those were intentional necessarily. But yeah, it would be a fascinating story. I want to see that story. I want to know that story. Yeah, New Moon just dropped. Too soon. All right. Speaking of fascinating, this is probably the most interesting one. I mentioned Naboo, and if there's a country, there's a planet that is most Canadian coded. It's Naboo. In some ways, not in others, but some of these are intentional. E.K. Johnston, in her Padme trilogy, established really some intentionally established and fascinating connections, politically and otherwise. And so we want to take a bunch of time to go through these. So again, it's another benevolent monarchy. One thing that really perked up, just this little detail, I think it's in maybe the one that's set latest in the chronology. Sasha is a member of cabinet. She's a secretary of something, or part of like the Queen's government. She's a representative. So there, my mind is like, okay, she's a member of Parliament in Canada in cabinet. There we go. Wonder if the governor of Theed sort of serves as a prime minister. Again, we don't have these lore dumps, but I don't. I use milk cartons too. So maybe
what you're saying is C.O. Bibble is basically the Naboo prime minister equivalent.
I'm wondering if there's something like that. I mean, I don't know if it makes sense to say having the. I mean, in terms of the way a prime minister works with a real monarchy with real power, yeah, effectively. But I wonder if there's also something about how he has the confidence of the House, the confidence of the Legislative Assembly.
C.O. Bibble question time when?
What does invasion mean? There we go. What does a communications disruption mean, Mr. Speaker? There we go.
Invasion! Yeah, and then all the parliamentary go, yeah! And then methinks the governor does protest too much.
Yeah. I'm going to quickly get to this comment. We'll get there. No, they're not. We'll get there in a bit. The Chomo sector overall, and this is also something that E.K. Johnston developed. The Chomo sector, which I think, the Naboo monarch doesn't have direct authority over, but the senator from Naboo has responsibility for. There is a sense that they're more federal. There's a lot of different interests, a lot of different planets. And so, I mean, that was a neat look into sector politics there. Again, like Alderaan, they're an ideal. They're idealized. There's similar things to Alderaan. Very outdoorsy. At least I imagine Alderaan's outdoorsy. In Naboo, we see the Queen's, I think Queen's Peril opens up with a cottage visit, with them going to the cottage. And that is a huge thing for Canadians, especially folks who live in the city and want to get away. If you can afford a cottage up in Muskokas or wherever, you go multiple times a summer. I know a lot of friends have cottages, have that tradition. I've been to cottages. It's especially in the summer. It's definitely a huge thing. I don't know if I'm sure it is a little bit in the US, but definitely a major outdoorsy. Go to the cottage, go to the lake, go canoeing, go whatever. So there. I mean, we know E.K. Johnston. She does a writer's retreat at a cottage, and some of her other novels are also have that. So that's a little cultural thing there, heavily supportive of arts. The arts, I think Europe does better than us with that, but there's
I mean, I've always
clear.
thought Naboo is more space Italy when it comes to the arts. To be
Yeah, that's probably true in that way, but yeah, definitely patrons of arts. We'll get to the big parallel, the Canadian parallel that's intentional in a minute when it comes to arts and culture. Another thing, lots of natural resources. Like we have oil, we have minerals, we have water, kind of like the plasma in the Darth Plagueis novel. Reminds me of that. The big thing, getting back to the arts and culture point, though, the big thing that E.K. Johnson popped in says, yeah, Naboo, Canada, the brain drain. I don't know if you've heard of this, Joel, but growing up, we hear about this all. Well, in this context, growing up, Naboo, it is more built up and wealthy, but it nowhere near the scale of the core worlds. So this really is about the parallels to the Canada-U.S. relationship. A lot of talented artists and other professionals, they go to Coruscant, they go to Alderaan, they go to Corellia to gain more opportunities and credits elsewhere. And that risks the quality of the culture and the educational opportunities on planet. And that's something growing up, all these creatives in Star Wars got to go to San Francisco, got to go to Pinewood. I mean, that's in UK. Got to go to the studios in LA. Got to move to California. I think Jim Carrey and Mike Myers and John Candy and all them.
William Shatner,
yeah.
Captain Kirk.
Having to move to the U.S. because the scale.
Alex Trebek.
Yeah, Alex Trebek again. All of these folks, and scientists and economists and intellectuals and everybody moving to the U.S. because and filmmakers and who else, moving to the U.S. because the scale of opportunities was so much larger, and what we had to do and what I imagine Naboo has to do are these targeted initiatives to compensate for what they're losing by staying. Funding, again, the subsidies funding local arts, culture, film scene here because otherwise they'll leave, maybe. And nowadays, probably less likely. There's a very strong made in Canada, move, especially in the last few months. But definitely, yeah, it's definitely tricky to say because the Canadian film, it doesn't have the budget, it doesn't have the talent pool of Hollywood, and it has the tax breaks. It's the interesting thing, right? Those tax breaks are a way of subsidizing to entice studios to come up here.
But then we just go to Britain because that's where we film most of the good TV.
But Star Trek is now primarily filmed in Canada, right?
That's true.
Filmed in Toronto.
I wonder if that's William Shatner's influence, or maybe that's just coincidence.
No, that's a coincidence.
Okay, okay, I had to ask.
Yeah, it's the tax credits. It's the thing. All the Hallmark films are filmed here, too.
They feel very Canadian, those Hallmark films.
Yeah, so
I like Hallmark films.
So that's something. Yeah, definitely. E.K. Johnson was saying a political challenge that Naboo faces in its relationship with the rest of the galaxy, with the core, with Coruscant, especially with hyperspace. And I'm a 2.5 hour drive to Buffalo. Not that I want to go to Buffalo necessarily, but I'm a 2-hour flight to New York, and when I go to New York Comic Con. So that's another thing, New York Comic Con. I love New York Comic Con. I love San Diego Comic Con. Looking forward to that. Gavin Newsom just putting out a video being all, hey, Canadians, come to California. I'm excited for that. That was very kind to him. Can he pay for my flight and airfare? That'd be nice. But here we go. So yeah, of all those things, what stands out to you? What do you recall, or What thoughts?
I'm a little suspect about Naboo always having a benevolent monarchy. I still think
Yeah,
there's some darker monarchs in its history.
like
I still,
Ars Verona.
yeah. He wasn't Plagueis, and we know he's canned, or at least his family's canned again.
Yeah,
So, well, he wasn't. I mean, he wasn't like a complete evil. He wasn't a
mhm,
psycho, but he was definitely shady.
yeah.
Um, Although he did create the Naboo Starfighter Corps.
Which is a little shady, right? Why do
Yeah,
they need a defense? We have a defense. We have an army.
got an army. I'll get to
Mhm.
some of my other stuff. So I'm a little. I think DK Johnson's doing a little bit of the not grandstanding. Yeah,
Greenwashing, red washing.
maybe I don't know. I don't think that's the word either. But I think he was
Mhm.
just oversimplifying that.
Yeah,
But outside of that, I mean, I kind of now always have wondered like, well, if Theo Bibble, even though they call him the governor, the prime minister job, then why does he actually have the power? Does Padme not actually do anything? I've always felt the
mm,
Naboo monarchy was more an executive monarchy than say what old
sure.
Charlie does. So it's like, well, does the head of state of Naboo have more political
It
power
seems like
than?
they do. Yeah.
Then it's sort of like, well, then what does Theo Bibble do? Um,
So what I meant by act as a prime minister, I mean the prime minister. It's called a minister because the idea is that the government advises the crown what to do. Right. It says advising the crown what to enact. So every law in Canada is an act of it's an act of parliament, but it's an act of the crown, or the you know parliament on behalf of the crown, a crown on behalf of parliament. And so the crown's representative, the governor general, has to sign everything into law. Um, the Similar to the president signing things into law. Crown doesn't have a veto. The Senate
I
doesn't
mean,
really have a
they
veto.
could veto it technically if they wanted to. They just never do.
No. And here's what I mean by an unwritten constitution. If that ever happened, we would become a republic lickety split.
Oh yeah.
And so they never will. Never will.
There's actually a bit of a tangent here, but there's actually like a movie, some
Mm-hmm.
overly dramatic movie about King Charles just
Mm-hmm.
before he became actual king. Um, and it's very dramatic and like over the top.
Mm-hmm.
Where uh Charles actually does enact his veto power, and then this is for Britain, it's not Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like against this like Tony Blair like
Mm-hmm.
character. He's totally Tony Blair.
Oh yeah.
Um, and then these like try dissolve parliament and like tries to get the army to support him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't remember how it ends, but it's just and no, it ends with him resigning, with him resigning as king and giving the power to basically William. And then he interrupts the coronation by putting the crown on William's head himself outside the priest.
Huh.
Um, Very dramatic and over the top. And there's like
Is it a comedy or is it something else?
no, this is a drama, and he's like he's the
Oh.
ghost of Diana, and it's all this. But it's
Oh.
sort of like yeah, like, but basically you're right. Like if he ever did that, Canada's a republic, and
Yeah.
chaos ensues.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would be a constitutional crisis, right? Because our constitution is the crown doesn't have power. The elected House of Commons is the one that holds all the power.
It was a BBC
Um,
thing.
yeah. You know, the elected House of Commons, and again, as I said, delineated with provincial legislatures as well. So, which are also run on a parliamentary system. So, um, those are the fascinating parallels to Naboo. Do you have any more to say on the fascinating and interesting and fun parallels, or can move on?
I
Um,
got I got an image for the dark parallels ready to
all
go
right.
for you. I got
Okay,
it.
so yeah, so we'll move move ahead. So there's a complicated one. It's mixed. Like I said, tomorrow's Canada Day. We are celebrating our history. 100 and I can't do math. 100 and I think 57, 58 years. Um, no, 100 and yeah, 158 years. I can do math.
How are you guys
mm,
younger? Oh, that's right. You didn't get your independence till
yeah.
too late.
Well, no, we've never been independent
It's true.
technically. technically. We
Still,
1980. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. So we celebrate our history. We learn in schools as a positive thing, like the Festival of Light, which that celebrates Naboo joining the Republic. I think specifically pointing out, when we see the Festival of Light in Clone Wars, there's a sigil of one of those sigils, those light things that light up behind Palpatine there. The history of the establishment of Naboo as a single human planetary authority, and it's celebrated. And
I think he even mentions the discovery of plasma too.
yeah, and different things. So this fun day, and tomorrow is going to have this different importance, but given everything right now, but yeah, I mean the complicated, the good of celebrating Naboo as this human planetary authority that later joins the Republic with its very human-centered Coruscant, but we are all the Republic. However, Canada Day is also tricky and complicated, and this gets to our bad, the bad.
I can show the image now.
Go for it.
Look, dead Gungans.
Dead Gungans.
Oh, by the way, Red, if you're seeing this, I got the Epic Marvel collection with the Clone Wars stuff.
Nice.
Look at this dead Gungan.
Mm-hmm.
And Dirge. It's like not good. Very creepy. Good art, though.
Yeah. Yes, Canada Day, when I guess when the BNA Act in 1867, the Constitution was passed in Westminster. There we go.
Jar Jar blows up the pipeline.
There we go. Going through these comments there. Yeah. I mean, the Governor General is, kind of their person. The Governor General is the representative of the crown.
I thought it's good karma too.
Yeah. I mean, again, that was a constitutional crisis in Australia, right? I mean, that's probably
Canada.
Well, no, I mean, I think. Well, yeah, sure, but I think I heard. The Governor General can't effectively subvert Parliament, and that's why there's a push for an Australian Republic, right? To abolish the monarchy. Again, you just don't do that. There are moments in Canadian history called the King Byng Affair, places where the crown representative got a little too involved. Sometimes, actually, and this is again the thing with the unwritten constitution part, the Governor General does have to make a determination about who the government is, who the Prime Minister is. When the most recent one was in the 2000s, the aughts, when so there's a Conservative minority, the Liberals and NDP got together and said, okay, let's form a coalition. And so Harper, Prime Minister, called prorogued Parliament, meaning ended the session, and the Governor General had to sit and decide, who am I going to give the government to? Usually it's straightforward. Again, it's whoever wins the election, whichever party wins the most seats. But here they had to, the Governor General, I think it was David Johnson, had to decide, do we carry on as usual, the norms and the way we've done it, or do we allow something like in Europe, like a coalition government, which is technically allowed, but because we've never done it, they kind of decided not to. It was unfortunate.
Wait, if you never had Canada's never had a coalition government?
Never had a coalition government.
So sorry, I wanted to just ask this question now because you got me interested. So, okay, so if Liberal wins the largest bloc, but it's not even a majority, do they still get the Prime Minister?
Called a minority government. And what it means is that they have to, for every bill, if they want a bill passed, they have to convince other parties to agree to it.
But don't you still have to win the approval to get the Prime Ministership?
So you still have them, and so, I mean, that's the thing. Generally speaking, they're able to get legislation through, but, I mean, well, here's the thing. confidence motions, right? And a vote of non-confidence. And
In
every budget,
Chancellor.
yes, in Chancellor. Yes, confidence supply agreements is another good example. So, yeah, the NDP, in the most recent government, the Trudeau government, Trudeau had a minority. NDP didn't have any. So a coalition means that there are members of multiple parties in the cabinet.
Right.
In the
Know that.
and so NDP didn't have any members in cabinet, but said they will support the government on confidence motions if they bring through a bunch of legislation, and so especially healthcare or no dental care. So there's more universal dental care now, and issues of the grocery store prices. I know that seems weird, but that seems obscure. But no, it was a big deal. You know, the price of food is a big deal, and so their most recent election was triggered because the NDP withdrew the withdrew the supply agreement. So yeah, I mean, yeah, no confidence votes are great. Another one, but no, I mean, you're looking at election. I mean that's how an election in a minority and the minority governments, the majority governments, there's a requirement for an election every 4 years. Minority governments, on average, last about 2 years.
Sometimes less.
Sometimes less. There was a thought that the Carney government would last even less, but yeah, I mean, in polarization, minority governments are far more common now that things are more polarized. But anyways, interesting we got there. We can move on ahead. So we yeah, so come to the Festival of Light, and tomorrow I'm gonna go chill. I got the day off. I'm gonna go read and go see some fireworks and be happy to be Canadian, but there are a bunch of folks who won't be happy, and that's an important point because it celebrates the consolidation of crown power in Canada, into under one roof, effectively, literally, in Ottawa, and a continuation of colonial heritage. And this is also a very strong connection here that Red Leader did refer to before. But yeah, the Dark Order, Theed, like Toronto, like Montreal, human colonies, even like, I mean, Virginia, other places. Gungans were land-based folks, right? They were land-based species, and when the humans arrived and set up their gleaming cities, they forced the Gungans underwater. The Gungans on a reserve, and now they're doing really well. We see in the Phantom Menace, they're doing better than a lot of Indigenous communities in Canada.
Gungan casinos, where are you?
But yeah, it's pretty clear that they're separate and apart. This separate apart, we feel it more in Toronto, and out west. There's a lot more Indigenous communities in the big cities. There are Indigenous communities in Toronto, but we see them less because there's also lots of immigrant communities in Toronto. There's immigrant communities everywhere as well, but yeah, this is definitely has shades of Otogunga. That's the reserve, right? That's the reservation. That's the res.
I don't even know if Otogunga is even a reservation because I feel like reservations are like officially known. I don't know if the Naboo know that place exists. It's like
true. Yeah, maybe they. Well, I mean, so we call it a cultural genocide. We call the residential schools a cultural genocide, right? The intent to civilize indigenous people and just make them assimilate into European culture. With Naboo, there are different species, so that might have been harder. Can't exactly. I don't necessarily want to know what. Be interesting. We don't see
Stop
Naboo.
saying Wisa every other sentence.
Wisa.
School teacher.
That old language.
Yeah.
Big deal. We don't. I don't know what Métis, Naboo, human Gungan will look like. Interesting. We don't know who's compatible. I'm talking about reproduction. Is what I'm getting at here. It's possible, but
we know human Twi'leks can reproduce. I think.
Yeah, that's true. But clearly, there was a displacement, and that there needs to. And we don't have a good story about this. What we do have is the Phantom Menace, and we have this deep distrust
and Plagueis, a little bit of Plagueis,
and a bit of Plagueis, the deep distrust that the Naboo that the Gungans have for the Naboo, and a lack of, and to say, oh, your galactic problems out there. What about the fact that we're stuck underwater and we have this historic trauma to deal with? And how dare you come here and ask us to be part of your war? And Padme has to go and actually kneel, actually beg. And there is a bit of a parallel here. So South Africa had their Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We had our Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I'd like to see a Naboo Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But one of the big things that come out of that, one of the calls to action, are apologies. And apologies that are backed up by concrete action. And so Padme going and kneeling and saying, we need you in this fight. Jar Jar being a representative in the Senate. There always being a Naboo, a Gungan representative as part of the senatorial attachment. I don't think there's even one. I don't know if Canada has an Indigenous representative at the UN in the same way.
Do you guys have what's it called? It's like affirmative action, but for seats in Parliament. Like you got to have X amount of seats in your Parliament for Indigenous people.
No, that would be a great idea. That'd be a fantastic idea.
I know some countries have like quotas. There we go. There's the word.
Yeah.
Like quotas for women, quotas for minorities.
So the way to do that is with proportional representation, right? And we don't have that either, which we should. Or another way to do that is for we call band councils to have MPs. There are Indigenous politicians, there are Indigenous MPs, Indigenous MLAs. One recent high-profile one, so in Ontario, super controversial bill by Doug Ford government to basically to say that there's a committee that can allow mining operations and other operations to be exempt from basically letting the local Indigenous community get permission. They have to give permission that can make that exempt. The environmental assessments, all that. Basically, I hope that one gets struck down by the Supreme Court because we have requirements. We have constitutional requirements. We have treaty obligations, and that whole thing. So there's an MLA, an MPP here in Ontario. Where am I from? I've lived here my whole life. Member of provincial parliament is what we call it in Ontario, at least. And he stood up, and he wasn't kicked out of the House. He was kicked out of the session because he was saying the government lied to Indigenous communities, that they care about it, and he's led this campaign against this bill. So that distrust that we see Boss Nass have of Padme, even of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, as we see, it really it hits home in a way. I mean, I'm not Indigenous, but that was a really great show of something that is familiar in that same sense. I mean, you brought
And
up
the
the dead.
sad thing I just
I
want to
was
add,
supposed to say you brought up the dead Gungan thing. I mean, those graves in Kamloops, BC, and all those schools. Yeah, I mean, there's that. I mean, that's a poignant
to
reminder,
be
right?
fair, this was the separatists that did this in this comic.
So,
This was not a Naboo past thing. This is just the separatists.
but I wouldn't be surprised if there's something like it. I mean, so those ruins that they're around. I mean, there are indigenous ruins in different places. But sorry, you want to jump in there?
I mean, you know what the sad thing about Phantom Menace in hindsight
Mhm.
is, you could almost make the argument Boss Nass is vindicated for his mistrust because, like, yeah, you might wouldn't it be sad if, like, yeah, Padme gets like a truce and reconciliation thing, or as Red suggested, a Soviet of nationalities, and
Mhm.
then 15 years later, Empire, Palpatine on Naboo. We know, according to at least the rise of Kylo Ren,
Mhm.
that Naboo prospers under Palpatine's rule. Although how much is Vinay just fibbing because he's
Mhm.
biased? It's hard to say, but I'm sure humans prospered like most humans in the Empire do.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't think Gungan probably had a good time under the Empire. I'm just gonna say that, even if Jar
Mhm.
Jar was the one who gave Palpatine the emergency powers.
It's not his fault.
I know it's not his fault,
Yeah.
but I it's like kind of almost it's almost sad in a sense where
Mhm.
it's like kind of in the long run, Boss Nass is totally vindicated.
Yeah.
And obviously we know. I mean, and obviously I know that the Vader comic shows humans and Gungans fighting alongside each other, the
Mhm.
Amidalians. But I gotta probably assume the Gungans had it worse than the humans.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
just think that's kind of tragic. I got more to say, but I'll let you
Yeah.
finish your
No,
thoughts.
it's a great point. I mean, think of is it the Flurman in that season 1 Clone Wars episode, the pacifists, or even the Mandalorians, right? They're resistant to um, any sort of Republic control during the Clone Wars. There's the thing, the clones they'll leave or things are restored, and they never leave. That. So
Yo,
yeah, it's um, it isn't a
Lurk.
deal with the devil. Like Padme, we know does her best to uh move things ahead, but to really make it more permanent, of course, she would have resisted, and the Rebel Alliance is her legacy. But um,
I would have loved to see
yeah,
General Jar Jar Binks on Yavin.
ah,
That's what I would have wanted to see.
there we go. Oh, I mean, we got to see more Gungans generally. I mean,
We got
yeah,
we got something about
yeah,
Gungans. With the Gungan graveyards on the moon colony, the Gungans' good relationship near them effectively a reservation. And even that got hit. Also,
yeah,
weirdly, those ruins are precursors. I love
yeah,
that Lord does not explore it. That race just disappeared.
yeah.
Also, this is what he was talking about when it comes to Soviet
Hmm.
nationality. Oops, oopsies. He said
Yeah,
apparently it allowed seats to ethnic minorities, both union-wide and small enclave, which in a given republic. So ethnic Turkmen in Kyrgyzstan gets a separate representative.
yeah.
That's
Um,
unfair.
we have that for Quebec. I mean, and we have different MPs. I mean, we also have a Senate that's appointed, and each province gets a number of senators. But yeah, and that. But no, that'd be a fantastic idea. I mean, give band councils MPs. Um,
I
you know,
mean, I know, like in.
in ridings that are primarily indigenous. Um,
Mhm.
you know, they're far more likely, of course, to elect an indigenous MP. None of it
I don't.
always their MP is always Inuit, most likely. So
I've always
yeah,
found
so
like
go.
that is like the most
Hmm.
probably most honest way to deal with stuff because, like, I
Hmm.
mean, this is my kind of hot take about separatism. It's like,
Hmm.
look, we kind of all have to live together in some way, you know.
Hmm.
I don't know if necessarily the answer to everything is let everybody have their own little mini country,
No,
um, but at the same time, you know, let's face it, in countries where there are multiple ethnicities, unfortunately, some ethnicities are not treated as well than others. Let's
right.
just so I just think stuff like that is a good step forward. I
Yeah,
actually got more to say about the dark stuff.
yeah.
'Cause I have a lot
So
of
good.
thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I think is interesting about Naboo, I can apply this to Ariadu as well,
Mhm.
is that I always considered Naboo and Ariadu. Funny how they're both in the High Republic. Um, and
Mhm.
obviously, that's Palpatine and Tarkin's homeworld. I
Mhm.
almost consider them like the core's little stepbrother.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is like, okay, so you know how like in political science terms, you got the core,
Mhm.
imperial core, which is America,
Yeah.
basically North America, with the exception of Mexico, and Europe, with the exception of
Yeah.
Russia. Although some people consider Russia. Um, depending on the day. But anyway, got the core,
Mhm.
and then you got the global south, which is basically Africa, Middle East,
Yeah.
um, all of South America and
Mhm.
Central America. I would consider like so like on Star Wars, you got the core, Coruscant, Alderaan,
Mhm.
Corellia. Those are the big planets. Those are the ones where everything stems from.
Yeah.
They're the power brokers, pretty much. Um,
And
so
Chandrilla.
Chandrilla too. Yeah, all,
Mhm.
all, all those core worlds basically.
Mhm.
Naboo and Ariadu are not technically core worlds. I don't think geographically they're core
No.
worlds, but they act like core worlds. They have the
Mhm.
influence. They have almost the same sort of influence as core world. Maybe not by a
Mhm.
lot, but they definitely got more of it than say random
Mhm.
outer like Tatooine. Like
Yeah.
unless you're Jabba the Hutt, no one cares about Tatooine.
Right.
Um, you know, you mean Vader doesn't care about Tatooine. That's how much he hates it. He didn't try to
Well,
make Tatooine an important political
that's because he's
planet.
from there, and it's full of sand and it gets everywhere.
Exactly. But Naboo and Ariadu are planets that like they want to throw their weight around. They want to
Mhm.
have their influence in the galaxy.
Mhm.
Um, but they're kind of still like the baby brother to Coruscant big brother, who's still like the like who still
Yeah.
probably have the infrastructure. Um,
Mhm.
and whatnot. Actually, it's funny. I wanted to bring this up because I saw this on Tumblr. I know
Mhm.
weird. Someone talk about Canada of all things,
Yeah.
and I just thought I'd read this out if you don't mind because I
Yeah.
thought
Go
it made
for
a
it.
great point.
Mhm.
Uh very direct, but I think it made some good points.
Mhm.
Annoyed. This is from somebody on Tumblr who said, "Annoyed at both U.S. and Canadian liberals acting like Canada is oppressed global South country that is under the boot of the U.S. imperialism
Mhm.
and full of progressive revolutionaries, when it's actually one of the wealthiest countries in the world and enthusiastic allies of U.S. and its imperialism most of the time. And when it isn't, it has its own imperialist and colonialist project, especially in mining, both in the
Mhm.
global South, that's South America and Africa,
Yeah.
and stolen indigenous lands within so-called Canada." Blah 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 blah. So yeah, basically it's like kind of so it's like even if let's say Naboo and Coruscant aren't getting along,
Mhm.
Naboo's still probably doing its own shady business with trying to woo its
Yeah.
way around. And in fact, I remember when Red was on here during we talked about Hope Dies.
Mhm.
There are like Canadian companies in South America
Yeah.
right now, probably doing some probably shady things because
Oh
that's
yeah.
what all companies in the global South do. So I think that's something very
Mhm.
similar as well, where it's like even if Canada isn't
Yeah.
like the U.S. empire with its massive military and army, it's
Mhm.
it's still a power of itself. It's not
Yeah.
a superpower, but it's definitely still got its own little project. It's like
Mhm.
we like a mini empire. We got our own little capitalist thing going on.
Yeah.
Naboo's like that too.
Mm.
Like we're like a little core world. Like we got stuff.
Yeah, no, it's
And area.
interesting that that they're both Naboo and Ariadu are also uh you know part of the Stormwall. I mean, the Stormwall moves to compass Ariadu, but
And
um
Palpatine and Tarkin's worlds too.
yeah, Palpatine and Tarkin, but the Nile uh are happy with it. I'd say in terms of Canada's wealth, yeah, I'd say that's part of the complicated bit, right? There's ways in which we've used that influence and resources for good. There's a Canadian who invented UN peacekeeping, Lester Pearson, won the Nobel Prize for it.
Mm.
Um, Sometimes we've resisted American imperialism, like we didn't go to Iraq, we went to Afghanistan. You're right. Our mining companies uh, are really probably really complicit in Latin America, in sub-Saharan Africa, complicit in a lot of problems, a lot of things. And so yeah, I mean, we have similar issues with poverty and with uh, preferring cars over having a really effective transportation system. So yeah, it's both. I do. I mean, I do see a lot of promise to. I mean, I really see a lot of promise to this new overture to the EU. Um, you know, that's the thing. Is it's almost like Mandalorians, right? If we you know, if the U.S. can't be a partner anymore, we can go elsewhere. And to the comments point, we have the privilege and ability to go elsewhere, right? We'll actually be fine. We're not under the boot. But another thing, maybe to push against it, the kind of the sentiment a little bit. People in the U.S. are saying, resisting rising up, calling representatives, calling senators, um, pressuring state legislatures and governors to enact things. Any movement in the right direction is a good movement. I saw Padme. She used her influence. She used prestige. Mon Mothma uses her influence and prestige. It's complicated. Saw Gerrera doesn't like it, but it ultimately to connect with the wider galaxy, with that Padme and Mon Mothma are able to do. And so, yeah, I mean, we definitely can be doing a lot better, doing way better. But yeah, there is a legacy of multilateralism and multinationalism that is well earned. That when I show my Canadian passport, if wherever I go around the world, it's going to be people are going to be respectful, I think. So, yeah.
Also, I got some more thoughts on Gungans.
Yeah. So,
Which is something I've always wondered.
mhm.
So I'm gonna just assume that there's nothing legally stopping an Indigenous Canadian from becoming prime minister,
No,
correct?
nothing legally. No.
I mean, I'm sure there's probably lots of social barriers and just economic stuff,
Yeah.
much like in the U.S.
Yeah.
That's probably stopping somebody who's Indigenous from becoming
No.
president of the
No.
U.S. But there's nothing like on paper that says an Indigenous Native American can't become the
No.
president.
Yeah.
Um, can a Gungan become the king of Naboo? Is that, like, even legal? Is that even, what is do the Nabooians
Mm,
actually control the whole planet? Like,
yeah.
is it, like, Feed and the humans and the Gungans are, like, 2 separate countries, but they gotta share the planet?
Yeah.
I assume that, but it's like, but I then know that it's the Naboo king or queen who appoints the senator from
Mm,
Naboo. So why
yeah.
do they get to appoint? Why is it not shared thing between the boss and the
Mm.
queen? I forget if E.K. Johnson said that after the Battle of Naboo there were Gungan representatives in the
I think
parliament.
so. Yeah.
So, okay, well, at least they get the parliament seat, but,
Hmm.
does that and, who actually can become a king or queen of Naboo? Is it, does it have to be a
Yeah.
royal house, or is it, is it like this weird election thing where it's like, "I have no
Hmm.
noble house, so I'm running for king of
Yeah.
Naboo, people. Vote for me. I am
Yeah.
not a crook." And that doesn't it could be anybody, so that just gets into all sorts of
Hmm.
complications, so I'm like,
Yeah.
"A Gungan become if the Gungan decide, 'Hey, I wanna run for king of Naboo,'
Hmm.
Do I get am I allowed? Is that a thing? Is that legal? Is that
Yeah.
illegal?
I
I'm
think.
'cause, again, I
Sorry.
just want because again, I assume that,
Hmm.
legally speaking, uh, indigenous an indigenous Canadian could, rise through the ranks of conservative or
Yeah.
NDP or become the party leader, and then bada
Hmm.
boom, you're prime minister. Congrats. I'm sure
Yeah. It's
I'm sure it's
possible.
more complicated than that, but,
Hmm.
nothing on
Um,
paper says you can't.
to answer Daisy's point, I mean, there's always an Indigenous MP in cabinet. Um, yeah. So that I mean, that's always the case. Um, if they'll make sure a party will make sure they run Indigenous candidates. I can see the Conservatives not bothering, but maybe not likely. So I don't know about a deputy prime minister, although deputy prime minister here is more of a nonpartisan bureaucratic position. Um,
Fair.
more like government leader in the House. I think Jody Wilson-Raybould was the government leader. So there have been politically powerful Indigenous folks. I think there's one Indigenous MP or one Indigenous premier of province, premier of Manitoba, Pablo Hidalgo's home province, is
Nice.
Indigenous. But no, there hasn't been a prime minister. I think what is different, what makes it even, I mean, I'll say this, it's a good allegory of the barriers that Indigenous folks face, that there other lots of minorities face, that women face in politics, right? It's a good allegory of the barrier. I mean, we just last few decades guaranteed parental leave. Yeah, all the funding, money is the biggest barrier, obviously, but also connection, integration in society, the network of campaigners and all that. That thing. I mean, the way you become prime minister, you become a party leader, is at the convention. We don't have primaries. It's actually at the convention. So, yeah, I mean, your popularity within the party, the party convention, I should say. So yeah, to go to allegory, I think where the parallel breaks down is that, yeah, it does seem like the Naboo are very separate. So the point where, again, they don't even know they exist. The Naboo don't really know they exist, don't really pay attention to them at all. Again, that's a good allegory about the way Canadians tend not to pay attention to Indigenous issues, except that over the last 5-10 years, we've had to because we've finally seen how terrible it was, how complicit we are. The issues, and the internet has helped with that. But Indigenous politicians and Indigenous business leaders, they're far more integrated within the rest of Canadian society than the Gungans seem to be. And so, yeah, that's kind of my answer there. Honestly, yeah. So that's the issue with this episode here, is a lot of lore that we don't know of yet, but this things that make us think, okay, what might be connected here. So,
Well, that's
yeah.
just the weird thing about has
Yeah.
always been the weird thing about Star Wars planets
Yeah.
in general. It's like,
Mm.
okay, it's like, it's like planets just need to have like one city state and
Yeah.
that's it. And it's like, well, are the Gungans and the Naboo like just two separate city states that just have their own, like, this is Gungan territory, this is human
Or one,
territory.
like a unitary government, you mean?
Yeah, where it's
Yeah.
like, like, who's the representative of Earth? Like, we have like 100 different
Yeah.
countries, um, and that's
Right.
just the country we made up ourselves, right? There no like
Hmm.
the president of, I don't know, of Italy gets to appoint the senator of Earth because I don't know reasons. Um,
Sure.
yeah, like the U.S. is never gonna let that happen. Be like
Hmm.
saying we, the U.S., get to appoint the senators of Earth because I don't know, get rid of the USA. Sucks.
Actually, you've heard of this move to let um, everyone around the world elect the president of the United States because the leader of the free world. You've heard of that, right?
Oh, that'd be hilarious. Yeah,
Love
why
that.
not? Let's go. Why not? Like everyone vote. But no, I mean it's weird because like what? Actually, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
What power does, like, we know Jar Jar can give Palpatine the emergency powers,
Mm-hmm.
but what does Jar Jar actually do? Like, what can he do? Like,
Yeah.
he's representative Binks, not Senator Binks. So he's
Yeah.
part of the delegation, but it seems like Padme's in charge of the
Hmm.
delegation. It's a good thing Padme and Jar Jar like each other.
Yeah.
Um, you
I
know,
mean, he's able to appoint emergency power because he's substituting for Padme in that moment in Attack of the Clones, right?
right.
And
But I
so,
guess then he can't. But like, if he and Padme don't agree on something, does he not get to vote, or does the
well, I mean, my guess is he has a voice in whatever Padme do. I mean, here's a question: does Padme actually pick Jar Jar? Why is Jar Jar? To your point. Yeah, does it pick? I'm guessing the representative can. I mean, it's like a junior senator almost, right?
Right.
Um, the Leia is the junior senator from Alderaan.
Nepotism.
Well, yeah, but can have an advisory position, but and substitutes for the senator. But yeah, it's a good question.
And also, I'm checking my notes because I'm looking at what
Mhm.
are the Gungans citizens of Naboo? I mean,
Yeah.
is Naboo just a citizen mark? Is I, it's like, well,
Mhm.
do humans have rights in Otta Gunga? Do Gungans have rights in Theed? Do you have to
Mhm.
get like a separate passport citizenship if you're going to move to Theed? If a Gungan wants to move to Theed, um,
Yeah, all these
that's
things.
it's like at least on paper in
Mhm.
America and Canada, you are a citizen of the U.S. You aren't treated great, but you're still technically a
Yeah.
citizen.
Although, I mean, there's
But yeah,
indigenous status called Indian status in Canada. So.
so I don't know.
Mhm.
It's weird and kind of like
Mhm.
there's a lot of dark stuff about Naboo when you really start to dig
Yeah.
into it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Uh, Also, I was thinking about this the other day because I
Mhm.
remembered this episode. Like, is it what wasn't like one of the Clone Wars episode where Grievous gets his butt kicked by Captain Topos and then Captain
Yeah,
Topos dies?
that was great.
R.I.P. a real one.
Hmm.
Where the whole point is like,
Well,
of
not
course,
great that he dies, but great episode. Yeah.
no, I
So
mean,
go
rip
ahead.
a great Gungan. But like the whole point is like Dooku through hypnotism is like trying to get the Gungans to separate and go to war against the Naboo again because that's what
Hmm.
sow divisions, good old fashioned separatist plots.
Yeah.
Um, but then that could make the question of like, well, is it like Dooku trying like basically I'm asking is like is Dooku trying to get two independent countries on the similar planet to go to war,
Hmm.
or is it like actual kind of separatism akin to Ottawa, which is a province, not Ottawa,
Quebec.
Quebec, or arming indigenous militias, which are other countries arming indigenous militias, which
Well,
has
I mean,
happened.
they have their own kind of warrior, tribal warrior.
Or
Yeah.
get Quebec to separate because I don't know, foreign power wants to start some stuff in Canada.
Yeah.
I again, I just am wondering like, what is legally the Gungan status on Naboo,
Hmm.
which is very.
Yeah. Great question.
I got nothing.
No
I
idea. But
okay.
it's a question because it brings up. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. What's the relationship between the going to Naboo? Are there parallels again in the current day? In the with Indigenous and Canadian. So, yeah, you mentioned the corn. This seemed like a fairly common strategy for the separatists. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. So I don't know. If you have any more thoughts, yeah, a lot of questions that this topic raises. I'm noticing this. I think next week we're not going to have a lot more concrete, intentional things to say, good and
USA,
bad. Let's let's let's
USA.
let's try and do a bit of good. I mean, there's some low hanging fruit, but
I Well, I mean,
yeah, hmm
I guess I'll guess
hmm
I'll ask. Well, I guess one more thing about
yeah,
since we talked about those mining companies,
yeah,
I wonder if like do the Naboo plasma companies are there like mega Naboo plasma companies looking for plasma in outer rim worlds that are doing some shady stuff?
or other parts of Naboo.
That's true. Yeah, I mean,
You
I'm sure I would not be shocked if if there's a story. I mean,
hmm
remember the pipeline back in '08, the big the
Yeah,
everyone wanted Obama not to sign.
yeah.
I wonder if like if there was there plasma
hmm
finding on a Gungan homeworld and something dead Gungans. I don't know.
or like Gungan territory on Naboo, right?
Yeah.
It seems so.
Those pla-
Yeah, really interesting questions. I mean,
what?
this is part of the wider theme of indigeneity in Star Wars. We didn't even talk about the Tuscans, just because they're on a desert planet. So, yeah. Yes.
Boba
There we
Fett
go.
needs to establish a Tatooine parliament and make sure like a certain percentage of seats go to his Tusken allies, which he would because he is Boba Fett and he is allied to a
Red,
Tusken.
it's not a land acknowledgement. It's a water acknowledgement. Shh. Yeah, land acknowledgements are interesting. I mean, they can commit us to action, or they can be very token, as Red is implying
Oh yeah.
very thinly. All right. Yeah, I think that covers it. Lots
Well,
about Naboo,
I
a
would
little bit
like
of
to ask
already.
that one more question
Okay,
that
go
I
for it.
had
Yeah, sorry,
on
go
the
for it.
notes. I know we kind of this was canon in Star Wars, but I wanted to ask this question anyway because
Yeah.
this is kind of this is both we decided this was going to be both Canada and Naboo centric.
Yeah.
So this can't really apply to Canada unless Canada somehow gets
It might.
galactic
We'll find out.
forms the Galactic Empire, not America, which it might. You
Hmm.
never know. Um,
Hmm.
I got it. The tragedy of I'm going to say the tragedy of Canada. The tragedy of Naboo,
Hmm.
um, is it is home to Padme and to some extent because of that Luke and Leia.
Hmm.
It is their heritage.
Hmm.
I'm I much like places like like a certain country in Europe called Austria, um,
Yeah.
and Germany. I mean, other countries can have this too.
Austria has a similar relationship with Germany that Canada has to the U.S. I think so.
That's true.
Yeah.
Oh my God, a Canadian. We are gonna let other people become the president. It's gonna be Canadian. Um, sorry.
Yeah.
But okay. Back to my point. Back
Probably
to my
true.
point.
Yeah.
Much like that, I do wonder: is the galaxy gonna even bother to remember Padme and the
Hmm.
ideals, or is it like, oh, that's Naboo, that's Palpatine's home. We had to deal with
Yeah.
25 years of his weirdness. Thank you, Naboo, for that. And
Yeah.
the cynic in me always says the worst things are always sadly remembered than the good things, especially in the real world.
Yes.
So I kind of wonder if poor Naboo, for all its charm and
Hmm.
beauty, it's only gonna remember like that planet gave us Palpatine, the
Yeah.
galaxy's greatest monster. Um, and if that's
Hmm.
it, I could even go and I don't want to get into my whole
Yeah.
people see didn't question Palpatine's choices of wardrobe because I thought, oh wait, that's just Naboo. That's
Hmm.
just his weird Naboo in him. But
Yeah.
and all said and done, it's like Boo, home of Palpatine and the birth
Hmm.
of evil. And that
Yes.
could be sad. That would be sad if that would be the case, especially for someone like us who have watched the Star Wars.
Hmm.
But for the in-universe people who didn't watch the Star Wars, is that all Naboo's going to be remembered for? I would
It's a
hope
great
not,
question. I
but it's
mean,
kind of sad to think about.
Charles Soule has revisited Naboo in Legacy of Vader, as you mentioned. Um, all
Not
we
much.
know there is they're just calling it fall into disrepair by the legacy of the Empire. You have to know here did well in the Empire. Is Vane being biased by saying, "Yeah, the Empire was great." Um,
I'm
but
sure
yeah,
some humans did fine.
oh yeah.
Unfortunately,
I mean, what have we seen about Imperial Naboo? We've seen,
not much.
um, we've seen Korsh Panaka being the governor.
Yep.
We've seen, we see Aftermath Naboo. Um,
Operation Cinder.
yeah, Operation Cinder. Yeah, they're doing okay. Like Theed's still going, but by the time Kylo Ren comes around, they aren't doing great. So
We know
yeah,
Palpatine just overthrew their monarchy, and then apparently their monarchy came back.
yeah. So yeah, it's a great question. I wonder if Charles might actually revisit that. He might go into that. We'll see. Red, I honestly have no idea what this is. Please enlighten me.
I say, wait, Alderaan really is Canada. Had their heir, and then their leader has a secret father who is really. Oh, I think this is like a Justin Trudeau conspiracy thing.
Oh yeah.
Or maybe,
Oh
maybe.
Fidel. Ha.
Oh yeah, that too. Oh yep, 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 yep. I remember that. I
I
mean,
only vaguely. I don't really remember that.
I don't. I mean, I remember the jokes. Um,
Yeah.
well, I mean, in America we have our patronage family, and look at what happened in New York with the Cuomo's.
Yeah.
We took
Sure.
care of that, thankfully. But got Trudeau Jr.
What? What? Sorry.
Ah, true.
This I only vaguely remember being a thing. It's not true, by the way, but Vaguely remember. Anyway,
Here's a good one though.
yeah.
Depends if people look back on Palpatine as kind of a loser for not being actually successful. Before more like fascist Italy, which aesthetically works for Naboo. And that's true. It's like
That's a good one.
Italy, home of pizza, and that loser Mussolini.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And Rome.
Yeah, the Pope. And other things. The Roman Empire.
Oh, I
There you go.
mean, if Luke had established his Jedi Order, he could have been the Jedi Pope. So again, he's from Naboo.
Sort of.
It's all coming together.
He's from Tatooine, Joel.
Okay.
Anyways, I think that's about it. Good place to wrap things up. If any last thoughts?
No, I mean, that's what's interesting. Talk about Canada,
Mhm.
and Naboo, and a little bit of Alderaan. But again, to remember, good old Hayden Christensen comes from Canada, from our
Comes
friends
from
up
my
north.
hometown, Thornhill, my suburb that I grew up
And
in.
I just remember one of the things a lot of people loved about his performance in both Kenobi and especially in Ahsoka Episode
Mhm.
5 was, and I didn't notice it because I just don't know what a Canadian accent is, but apparently
Yeah.
he got to use more of his Canadian accent in
Yeah.
Ahsoka than he did in his entire time of the prequels, and people felt that
Yeah.
helped his performance. I don't see it because I don't know what a Canadian accent sounds
Well, there's a
like.
specifically Toronto accent that he has. Dom has it a little bit. I don't really have it, but
I just want to hear
there's
Anakin say a boot.
interesting. Oh, I need to hear more lieutenants in Star Wars. Anyway, go for it.
A boot. All right. Okay, right.
Yeah.
But yes, all right. I think that's a good place to wrap things up for this week. Thanks everyone for joining us. Let us know what you thought of our conversation tonight. Comment below, let us know. Also, please do give this video a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you, Matthew, for leading us in this conversation about your native country of Canada. We should do other country comparisons in the future. I don't know how we could. Actually, you know what? Here's a good one we should do in the future after we do the good old US of A. Let's do Japan. Let's do Japan. Maybe like next month when we get to close divisions.
Sure.
So yeah, that'd be good. But thank you. You can follow us on Blue Sky, EYEONCANON Bisky.social. I would call it Bisky. At Ion Cannon Pod, of course. You can follow us there. You can follow us, of course, on the Star Wars Underworld Discord, link in the below. Nothing this week because of 4th of July. We have games, movies, discussion, all sorts of fun things. Let's see. And Matthew, where can they find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at MNEUG1138. Also Instagram at beaches.foodie, FOODIE, where I post food stuff that I've eaten. Stuff I've eaten that looks good, that I enjoy. So yeah, check that out. Still on the Bird app, NEUG 485. Yeah, that's a good idea to do an episode. It's gonna be fun. Looking forward to sleeping in and then going watching some fireworks down at the beach tomorrow.
Nice. Of course, again, give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, IonCan, and the Star Wars Underworld. You can find me, of course, at GID20234. Again, GID20234. I am going to enjoy some fun Star Wars comics.
Nice.
Clone Wars Epic Collection, and I got my Old Republic Epic Collection. So, Red, if you have any of these, we might do some of these in the future. Now that I have them. That'd be fun. All right, next week, talk about our neighbors to the north. But now we're bringing Star Wars home to the US of A. I'm kidding. I'm being overly silly. But yep, Star Wars and Stars and Stripes. We're talking about America, and its connection to Star Wars. I mean, I don't know. It probably doesn't have that much.
Still
It's cool enough. But yeah, it's close enough. But yep, until then, everybody, let's blow this thing and head home.